Hello, hello. Is Kenyon here? Is Basketball Rewind? And guess what? I have a new guest for everyone here. Beyond Locker Room and Coach Roach couldn't join this time, but they will join the next time. With that being said, uh, how are you doing? This is Esfandier Baraheni. Hopefully, I pronounced that moderately okay.
Yeah, you passed. It's all right. You
I
passed.
passed.
It's
I
all good. It's
passed the
all good.
test. Okay.
Yeah.
And so yeah, first of all, I just want to give a little bit actually before you go into how you're doing, just a little bit about you. So, if I'm not mistaken, you are a content creator for SDPN.
Yep.
You also have been, I believe, you had an internship with the Raptors at one point with their broadcast crew.
Yep.
You have been very well integrated within the Toronto market just in general because you moved to Canada and basketball was kind of your life for a lot of your upbringing. Of course,
For
to the
sure.
point where you even played basketball overseas. I think you coach.
No, no, no.
You
Hey,
know,
time out. Time out. Time out. Time out.
hey,
Hey,
hey, I
hey,
know what you're
hey.
saying. I know what you're saying. University still counts. Okay,
Oh man, you gonna make me sound like some next, hooper. I got like a
Nick
bum knee. I do
Nurse.
have
You
a bum
know,
knee. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, I wasn't in the BBL or anything like that. No, I played a season for the University of Liverpool. It was
hey,
fun.
still
It was.
counts, man.
Hey, you know what? I'll take it. You
LinkedIn.
go ahead. You go ahead. You go ahead. You keep rocking. Tell me more about my Euro career, man. What's
Exactly. And not only that, but I know that family's important to you because you left that career and you left law school to come back to take care of your family, which is
yeah,
important,
yeah.
and follow your other passion, which is basketball. So, with that being said, welcome to the pod. Good to have
Thank you,
you.
man. Yeah.
Uh, Other guests, don't be jealous. I'm sorry. You know what? I'm spending a little bit more time getting better, so I'm going
All
to give
good.
everyone a
All
better
good.
shout out
Hell yeah.
moving
Yeah, absolutely.
forward.
Thank you.
So yeah,
Thank you so much for having me, man. Thank you so much.
appreciate
Again,
it.
like I said off air, I was like, I would have loved to have been with the whole trio. Hopefully we can get that down. But I'm excited to talk Raptors basketball with you, man. And thank you for gassing up the Euro career. You know what I mean? I actually that you know what I went there, played for a year. I actually broke my ankle there playing basketball, and that was sort of actually it was pretty much the downfall for my prime, if you will, for basketball. Broken ankle later on, knee surgery, all that stuff. So yeah, it started the downfall of my basketball career, if you will. But ultimately, all good, man. Thank you very much for having me on, man.
No problem. I mean, I played basketball up until high school, but to be honest, I had a different sport. I'll tell you after. I was
Okay,
second in BC for that sport, so
cool. All
um,
right.
that was the sport that I did. But yeah. Anyways, with that being said, going more towards the topic of today, we decided between two topics. I'm not going to tell people the other topic because you're going to come back for that one, so people stay tuned for that. But today we are going to be talking about the Raptors defense, but primarily honing in on Pascal.
Hmm.
So, one other question before we start, because this is actually somewhat relevant. Do you remember the first time we talked? You might not.
The first time we talked,
Yeah,
I think that honestly, probably not. I think
that's
the
okay.
first time I remember talking was in a spaces we were talking about the whole rebuild thing. That's probably the
It was
first time
actually
I remember.
before then, but
Okay.
you may not have noticed because you may not you heard my voice, but you didn't see me because I was handed a mic
Oh.
by Samson.
Oh, oh.
Do
Okay,
you
I
remember the
got you.
question?
Yeah, no, I don't remember the question, but I remember
I
now that
asked,
situation.
have we ever built a team around Pascal?
Hmm. Right,
And that
and I
was the
think,
question.
yeah. What did I answer back then? Because
I
I
said,
feel
no,
like it
not
was,
really.
yeah. I feel like my answer is still no, not really. Well, probably a definitively no.
Yeah.
I just think this era, and I was talking about this on another podcast before, but this Pascal era really feels like it's just going to be marked as one of transition. And it's unfortunate because he's such a high quality player, such an all NBA talent, like one of the best players in franchise history. And yet it feels like this entire era he is being used as a bridge to another era. And we can go tit for tat on like why that is,
Mm.
potentially some of the free agent stuff that they didn't land on, some of the moves that they thought they might have worked out better didn't work out as good as they probably thought it would. But ultimately they haven't put all their cards in a guy like Pascal Siakam. And to be honest with you, now it seems like they're actually pulling away some of those cards as well to not prioritize him in the offense, if you will. Maybe moving towards a more of an egalitarian style versus something that maybe suits him on offense. But yeah, it's unfortunate, man, because he is such a high quality talent, but it just seems like he's not the priority for the Raptors.
Well, it's interesting. Again, we're gonna get to the topic at hand, but what's most interesting about that, and I think you're starting to see a shift because any coach that is gonna adhere to whatever principles they're either being told or that they come in with on the job, when losses start piling up, your
Mm-hmm.
resume only comes from one place, which is
Yeah.
the wins.
Yeah.
And the most competent offense that we have is involving your best player. That's usually the case in the league. I don't know. I just even
No,
the
you're right.
beautiful game Spurs, when it came down to crunch time, it was one of two guys, occasionally the third guy,
Yeah.
and the third guy wasn't bad at all. I'm just gonna say that to Manu,
Yeah.
but
Hey,
it,
he's one of my favorites. No doubt, no doubt. Yeah.
absolutely. But I mean, when it came down to crunch time, obviously before Kawhi, even when Kawhi was there, jeez, I mean, it was Duncan was the man. So
Yeah.
I've always, in terms of the number one, number two stuff, I've always felt like it's hard to even answer that. I lean towards him not being a number one,
Mm-hmm.
but how do you know if you've never really tried to maximize
Yeah.
a person? You know what I mean? Like even
Yeah.
with Scottie, it's like, if we just put shooters around Scottie, is that maximizing his skill set if he can't create an advantage?
Yeah. Yeah.
If
No, right.
now if you have the best shooter and cutters in the league, I'm talking Steph and Clay, different story.
Right. If you have Jamal Murray, if you have Kentavious Caldwell Pope, Aaron Gordon, like that, yeah, you're right. Your team structure, roster construction, is as much impacting the player as anything else. And that also applies when guys jump ship to a different team, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes you see a player go from a situation that doesn't help them to a situation that maybe benefits their style of play a little bit more, and they blossom into a different type of player. That doesn't mean they have some massive jump in their career, but just they look much more better. They look efficient. I think ultimately, when it comes to a player like Pascal and them building around him, him being the number one option, I think they had an idea for what this team could look like, and it never envisioned him as the number one option. It was
Mhm.
always, okay, how can we get Pascal a number one option that he can be the running mate to? They obviously went for Giannis. They tried to go for Giannis. They tried to go for Damian Lillard. They tried to go for Kevin Durant, all in the sake of finding, that other guy to pair with Pascal, and then they can be that duo moving forward. I think when you look at what Pascal can bring as a creator, right? He's a great isolation scorer. He's at least developed into a great isolation scorer. He's a great post threat. He constantly, even last night we saw that he gets the help from the weak side, and then he's able to kick it. That creates an advantage in itself. And he was improving as a playmaker and creator, and essentially like just all around hub offensively. And I think when you look at what that is and what that is meant to be in the NBA, that's a hard thing to come by in basketball. Just a
I'm
guy who can do all of
Yeah.
those things.
I
It's
mean, the
really
other
difficult.
thing too, right, is like I remember I think it was is it Amit or Amit? Sorry if I'm
Mm-hmm.
um but I
Yeah.
was speaking to him briefly. He's gonna come on soon as well, so you're up next. But um I heard his podcast with I believe I'm gonna butcher it because I don't know the or Javon Freeman Liberty, or is it Javon Liberty
Yeah.
Freeman?
Javon Freeman Liberty.
Okay, I always just say the guy that sounds like he should be from Philadelphia. Uh, but so his conversation with Javon, and one of the things that stuck out to me is Javon said, "Yeah, I just came in and just watched Pascal work out
Yeah.
because he was in such awe of like this dude is practicing at game speed every day, all day, kind of a thing, and having that, even if it is like as a you know, transitionary period. That's useful. I mean, we saw, I'll use Houston as just a quick thing. Houston had to pay what Beyond calls a credibility tax because if you have too many youngsters,
Yeah.
right? You need someone, an adult in the room to kind of bring them together.
Yeah.
Um, or several adults. I know they didn't get Brooke Lopez, but they got two at
Yeah.
least, to kind of bring everyone together. And it's hard for young players to learn how to win together. It really is. I know Stan Van Gundy talked about this with the Sixers. Maybe part of the problem with the Sixers is, going the Hinkie era is, it was kind of nice, but at some points you kind of you don't develop that culture or bring along that culture of winning along.
Yeah.
And when you're that young and you have that access to whatever the heck you want to do, it's hard to be a professional.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Oh my God. And especially when that culture starts to seep into everything you do. And you look at like the Pistons, right? Who have struggled to get out of their rut for a really long time. I think part of that, part of hiring Monty Williams, part of bringing in Dwayne Casey, part of bringing in Troy Weaver, that was in an effort to really just it's something called organizational rot, right? Because everything it becomes acceptable to half-ass, if you will, certain aspects of the job, and ultimately that seeps into everything you do, and it seeps into the developmental process. It seeps into the habits of the players. Houston saw that being an issue, and they went out and got Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, Jeff Green, etc. Yeah, it's a huge part. And when you look at like what the next phase of Raptors basketball will be, most likely I mean, we don't have to jump into this conversation, but it most likely will end up being somewhat of a reset or a rebuild around Scottie Barnes, just reading the tea leaves and looking at what might happen. Um, I think that is something you have to be aware of, and that's why you see a guy like Darko Rajakovic being hired, which is, he emphasizes the everyday, win the day, right? Um,
Mhm.
so I think like they're keeping that in mind going into this next phase, because it's going to be so important to not have that organizational rot.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you talk about organize. I guess we'll touch on this just a little bit because I know we want to say it for another day, um, but we will touch on it a little bit. And it's you mentioned organizational rot, and one of the things that I notice is that compared to the championship year, it's almost like we've been running on a skeleton crew in terms of who's been in the front office doing certain jobs, especially from the developmental standpoint. We got some people back, Jama, right? But we
Yeah.
lost a lot of developmental staff. And
Yeah.
my challenge, and this is my, if I want to say a gripe with the front office and management of this team over the past few years, is sure, I love the Noah, I love technology, I love all of these things, but there's a people component and a relationship component to the NBA and a lot of things in life, to be honest, but especially within the NBA, that can't be circumvented in favor of technology. It needs to have the partnership of both of them. At least that's how I feel. I mean, you could have, what is it, the robot that shoots and every single time it's a
Yeah.
perfect three. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's different between having that and having, Hakeem Olajuwon. You send a dude to every summer. I mean, I saw Jalen Green,
Yeah.
Luca. Everyone's like, oh man, Luca. Luca is like, I'm gonna humble myself. I'm gonna work with Steph.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. I mean, look, I think like there are ways to get around development, right? And maybe not get around development, but like just like improve it outside of your organization. But I do think it starts with having a solid foundation at the organizational level. So whether that means, like you said, Jamma coming back and being this huge developmental piece, like just a guy who like everybody kind of relies on him to be a guy for you. And also they've brought in an entire staff now, like 15 people deep of essentially everybody has experience in the development sector, whether it means player development, whether that means personnel development, whether that means training and development. I think that's an underrated aspect of things. It's like building good habits on your training.
Even
Uh,
on the 905. I mean, the
yes. Yeah.
905, that pipeline was kind of, I don't want to say fully neglected, but in a way it was kind of neglected in some ways. Now, part of that is obviously the rights that you have over your 905 players, and that's not something that you have control over. Um, if I was a commissioner for a day, I know the players wouldn't like it, but that's one thing that I would change is you'd have a little bit more. I hate using this term, but control over your 905 or G League players.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, so anyways, we're gonna talk about Pascal today. So specifically the defensive end.
Okay.
Um, the team as a whole has really improved from last year. Now, personally, was not. I said that they could be top five defensively coming into this year, regardless of
Hmm.
what they did. Put some dudes out from this squad. You know, yeah. I don't. Do you watch Big Brother at all?
No, no, I don't. But
Okay.
I know the concept. I understand the
So you
concept. Okay.
put your hand in the box and you pull out some names and then, oh, this is this person. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah.
So basically it's kind of like that. If you just put some random dudes from your squad out in general, you should be able to field a decent top 10 defense. I thought they would be top 5. The
Yeah.
offense obviously was going to be not as good, but you expected I said that if they can get to around the 18th best overall offense, that they could put together a team that would be playoff bound. I still think that they're playoff bound, by the way.
Okay.
So, with that being said, there have been improvements in the defense. Some of those are concepts. I noticed something before we really jump into it. And I'm going to ask you if I'm crazy or if it was just an aberration, and then from there we can go. So one of the things that I noticed is that so Darko mentioned, shout out to Samson for asking a basketball question in the first presser. He basically talked about his defensive principles, and one of them is taking away almost the opposite of Nurse, taking away the corner three.
Hmm.
Okay.
Right.
And basically pushing guys to break and above because
Yep.
in a way, the way that I kind of look at it, you're kind of letting the geometry of the court do the work for you. So makes sense.
Hmm.
My thing is that I noticed that on the weak side, whoever is the wing, whether it's Grady, whether it's Pascal, whoever, they will shade a little bit over to kind of guard against weak side corner threats. I don't know if that's something that you're noticing or not. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know what I'm talking about. But that's the first thing that I wanted to notice because that seems to be, I mentioned on a post today where I'm like, well, Scottie gambled, but I didn't, people took it the wrong way, of course. It's Twitter. But, what I meant was the gambling isn't necessarily on accident. It could be by design, but he gambled with his
Hmm.
length, jumping out to the corner, even though someone was closing out to the corner to really make sure that it wouldn't go to the corner. Wondering if
Yeah.
your thoughts are on that, and if you like that principle.
Of taking away the corner three. I mean,
Yeah,
I
with
I've
on the weak side by shading over.
yeah, yeah. I think that is a lot of NBA teams do that. Like
Mm,
tons of NBA teams take away corner threes because in the end, one, it's the most efficient shot from the perimeter, but also above the break free threes are just harder. It requires a different skill set to knock down above the break threes. You're also, like you mentioned, I actually thought that was a great point. The geometry of the court changes for you when you're allowing more above the break threes than you are corner threes. This also applies to the Raptors because you have a lot of teams willingly sagging off and helping off of the corners against the Raptors because they're okay with them hitting those shots. Or they're like, go ahead and take those shots. We're not going to let you feast in the paint. We're not going to let Pascal feast in the paint. We're not going to let Scottie feast in the paint and be, those interior forces that they are. On the defensive side of the ball, I think it makes tons of sense. I think the fact that they are able to, one, take away the corners, but also be willing to rotate out onto those above the break threes, whether it be flybys, whether it be hard closeouts, and then live with the consequences of that. Now that you have Jakob Poeltl as your backline defense, you are more confident in them being a little bit more aggressive in these actions. Whether that means, yes, helping off of the corner or even if you do, let's say, for instance, they do help off of the weak side corner. There's a pick and roll action, and for some reason, they kick it out to the weak side corner for a three. You actually trust the Raptors' length to get to that shot. And I think that's an underrated part of this aspect, too. It's like that corner distance is much shorter than an above the break distance. So you can actually get out to that shot much faster than you can an above the break three. So yeah, I think that's essentially where I'm at with the corner three, and just in general the Raptors defense so far. They've played an aggressive style. Guys like Dennis Schroeder at the point of attack, guys like OG Anunoby obviously at the point of attack. They've been able to do this kind of aggressive scheme that they're trapping a bunch at the top of the key, above the break, point of attack. My question would be is how are they going to look against teams that the size issue doesn't matter as much, because the Raptors can outsize pretty much every team, right? But there are teams that are tougher matchups. We saw that on opening night against the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves are just a bigger team, right? And that gave them some troubles. We saw that against Philadelphia a little bit. I thought that we saw, Joel Embiid is obviously a mismatch against everybody, but the Sixers have a lot of size as well, especially in their front court. You're going to have that issue against the Pelicans, who are a big team. Same thing with the Lakers, who are a big team. So, like, I just think of certain types of matchups that might be hard to, really emphasize and pronounce their length, which makes me kind of wary of them being like a top. My aspiration for this team is that they could be the best defense in the NBA. There's a possibility of that happening, but how are you going to overcompensate or compensate when teams are just bigger than you? That's my question, sort of leading forward on the defensive end.
I have a theory that could get you there, but
Okay.
it requires an update from a certain man with respiratory issues.
Oh yeah, fair enough.
I know. So I watched quite a lot of 905 games last year, and I also watched him in college. I really like Christian Coloco, and I think that he, at least in times in spurts, has shown flashes of passing chops. So in
Yeah,
terms of that hypothetical, guy kicking out to one corner or the other,
right.
or as a hub, I think he has. It's weird because people are like, "Oh, he has bad touch." I'm like, "No, he doesn't have bad touch. It was strength. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's just, he needs,
Yeah, he needs to be stronger.
he
That's for
needs
sure.
dumpling."
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
So I mean that's really it, because his positioning is good. He's nimble too. I remember
Mhm.
the odd time that Fred actually did run pick and roll with him, because most of his passes, actually, funny enough, came from two people, one of which Samson talked about it, the other which Samson didn't talk about, which is his countryman Siakam.
Yeah, yeah,
Those are the
yeah,
only two people that really passed him in general. So
yeah, yeah,
but I remember Fred snaked the pick and roll, and Fred was just getting used to snaking the pick and roll in the way that he was last year, and he almost ran into Coloco. This is against the Pacers, so you can look this up possession by possession, because I think he ended up shooting it over. I can't remember who on the other team, but it was one of their longer defenders. Um, and he just he kind of sucked in, kind of stutter stepped, and then kept going, and it was like, this guy's 7 feet,
yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
and he did that, and he was totally in control of his body. I mean, I haven't had the chance to have a good person to talk about it with, but athletic fluidity is
Hmm.
something that I always that's always my conversation with OG. It's like some
Yeah.
of those things you have to work on before a certain age,
Hmm.
or else it's very tough. And I think Coloco has it. Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. You look down the list of those: Evan Mobley, obviously, Russell Westbrook, both
Yeah.
Gary Paytons, um, Roberson, Andre Roberson, I think
Andre
was.
Roberson. Yeah,
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 yeah. I'm remembering.
yeah.
So the list goes on. There's obviously more than that, but it's a really good list, and they were all really good defensive players for
Hmm.
the most part of their career, and they were all really high end, high IQ players. And
Right.
I think when you struggle to play a Pirtle above 25 minutes, partially because foul trouble, and also, frankly, I know it's only one game winner three, but the form doesn't look like Pirtle, where he's
Yeah.
shooting. Pirtle looks like he's shooting beer pong.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah, he that's why his push shot is so good, because he can
Yes,
like he's like throwing it up like this, like I don't even know how to
I say
what
it's like beer pong. It's
it
literally
is kind of
like
like beer pong. It kind of is like beer pong. Yeah, he has an interesting push shot that works. I actually need him to get on that a little bit more, because I feel like it's more available to him in this offense. But
that, and Pirtle has a really good hook shot from around that area.
yeah.
Actually, on a just under 100 possessions, 99 possessions, or maybe it's 98. He shot 55% from around the top of the key on
Yeah.
push, and so
Yeah, he was super
it's
impressive. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, look, on the Coloco front, first of all, I hope he's okay. I hope he's healthy. I hope he gets to the point where he's able to honestly come back and play basketball again, because a respiratory issue of this length means that it's pretty severe,
Hmm.
and that there's something there that they have to figure out long term. Who knows what that is and what that might be, but I think he's a big part of the future of this team just because, you know, the fit. I love Jakob, I really do, but I think fit wise there is some wonkiness to him and Scottie as the future of your front court, and Pascal obviously. Like that trio as the front court, it just doesn't have a lot of spacing. It also, vertical threat wise, Jakob isn't that much of a vertical threat. He's more of a short roll threat for you. So Koloko can compensate in certain ways that Jakob can. And I hope he's here long term because
I mean,
yeah.
I'll put it this way: if the Yak trade didn't happen and we actually went for, say, Turner,
Mm-hmm.
or KP. Now I know that there's other ancillary issues with getting KP. Don't want to get into
Yeah.
them today, but in terms of just basketball, period, end of story. If we went for those for the past 2 years, you probably wouldn't be saying it can't fit between Scottie and Pascal.
You're right. Yes, you're right. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that's the only thing that I keep harping on is I'm like, okay, but really, is it? I'm not trying to blame one person or the other or anything. I'm just saying, like, if it wasn't for the center,
Yeah, the
there's a
conversation would be
pathway.
different. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. The conversation would be different. And hey, maybe like that's a route that they decide to take. Like
Yeah.
I'm not putting it out of question that Jakub, who got traded here, saying that hey, this team's gonna try to compete and be a playoff team and whatnot. Maybe he doesn't feel as happy about his situation in the next couple of months, given where the team is. I'm not sure, but regardless, like,
Mhm.
yeah, I think fit is a huge aspect of why this team is even having these questions, and especially front court fit. And if you have a guy who can space the floor for you at the 5 spot and do some of the, like you said, like just other things on the court, block shots, deter shots, and that's how KP and Turner have kind of made their money in this league. It's being able to space the floor and be these rim deterrers in the middle. If you can do that, that fits so much more well with Scottie Barnes and Pascal Siakam versus a guy like Jakob, who is he's kind of occupying a lot of their space a lot of the time.
Absolutely. Because, and I'll just make the last point because before I start going into some number stuff, um, if a guy's really good, timeline doesn't matter. I mean, Luca
Mm-hmm.
came and it's like Luca's not that much older than Scottie Barnes,
Yeah.
and yet they're like, "Yo, we got to get this dude some help," and stuff. You know what I mean? Like it's like, and so you don't necessarily need to be in a situation where it's like you're losing help to go get help literally within 2 years. Also, I'll be honest, Scottie, the one thing that I've never said, I've always had my concerns about the handle, still have them, and the shot. Although I've always said this is actually before Samson. Sorry, Samson, but I said that the handle's more important than the shot because if he
The
can
ha-
get into spaces, it
mm.
will allow him to be able to create an advantage that way
Did you,
and build him time for the shot.
now are you talking about Scotty or are you talking about?
Scottie.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. I think even when we were talking about OG, I don't know if I had this conversation with you, but I've had it on spaces before. But what OG genuinely needs to get more adept as a pull-up shooter, as a creator for himself, is a more functional handle. That is what he needs. I think, like, yes, it's there are moments where OG will like get into his dribbling bag and ultimately like his left hand is just not as good as his right, and it's very obvious in the
I mean,
way
a
that
certain
he's kind
number
of
7
approaching things.
overall pick, showed him the
Yeah.
business.
Hey, yo, you're right. You're
but
absolutely right. Yeah.
but I was more gonna say, where I was going with it is that the thing that I don't think I've ever said otherwise about Scottie is that I don't doubt his desire to win. He wants to win, and so I don't think you can go through a long situation where you're not in winning situations and expect a Pat Riley, if he's still not retired, then to not bring him home. And so that would be that's my concern long term. But going into uh, the topic at hand really is the defense. So I wanted to talk about Pascal's defense. So I pulled up some numbers earlier from Cleaning the Glass. Don't pay for a subscription yet, but they do have some free free pages that you can go to. So yes, but there's a few things that I noticed when Pascal's on the floor. So first things first is in terms of the I guess this isn't really the turnover. I want to. I'm going to ignore I said defense, so I'm going to ignore the offensive numbers. Let's go just to the defensive numbers.
Okay.
Opposing defenses, and this is important because we don't always have the chance to. If it's not Pirtle, Precious, I don't see him as a long-term answer at center, just because he's 6'7". I think Scottie's taller than him. And I mean, I think that him doing what he did against Embiid in those playoffs, that is never happening again.
Mm-hmm.
No shade to him. He's a really good defensive player, but I mean, Embiid's Embiid.
I mean, it's tough to guard a guy like Joel Embiid. Like, it's just you're not gonna have an easy time guarding a guy like Joel Embiid. There's only like there isn't a player in the league that can like fully contain him. So yeah, I hear you.
Right. So my thing is that you need to find other ways of doing that. Rebounding is really important, and limiting opposing teams' offensive rebounding rate is very important. With Pascal on, the opposing rebound rate dips by 16%. That puts him for the 95th percentile in the league. Right. I think there's also a reduction in fouling. So opposing teams get to the line at a rate that also puts them in the 91st percentile. Mm-hmm. Those are two very big things. I won't have the offensive discussion of my issue with us getting to the line this year, because that's decreased. We were 16th. We went to 19th. But on the flip side, you see what it does limiting those things for other teams. So I want to start there beyond the fact that he locked Ant up. I just want to put that out there too. In that Minnesota
game.
You're
right. Yeah, he did. Yeah, absolutely. Look, Pascal, I think if you look, I would love to maybe go back and look at this, but if you look at like distance traveled on defense over the last couple of years, he's probably near the top of the league.
Yeah.
The amount of ground that he covers as a help defender has covered so many holes for this Raptors defense consistently. You know that meme of the guy smacking the tape on the water that is pouring
yes.
out? You know what I'm talking about? Yes. That is Pascal almost consistently on defense for this team. What's that tape called? I forgot.
I want to say gorilla tape, but it's not gorilla tape. But I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But that is honestly, he is plugging so many holes for the Raptors defense on the help side as this roamer, as this guy who's like using his length to be a disruptor. He is so good at that end of the court defensively. And the numbers, the advanced numbers have never been kind to him, because he has always been trying to, one, bring up the floor of the defense versus increase the ceiling. He's a floor raiser as your defense versus being a guy who like elevates your defense to another level. Maybe on a different team, that would be a different case. But for this Toronto Raptors team, that's been the case. And the advanced numbers just don't like players like that defensively.
I don't even know. Usually, I don't even know if we know how to properly track defense fully yet, which is part of the problem. Right. But sorry, you were saying.
No, you're right. No, yeah. Sorry, I think mostly like the off ball stuff for me is so special when it comes to Pascal. And when we talk about distance traveled, right? The last 2 years he led the league in minutes per game. When you talk about the dip, him not being as effective as a defensive player, those two things correlate almost completely, because he's being asked to do so much moving on the defensive end, and obviously he's logging such a high usage, such a load on the offensive end. Now that maybe hopefully he's kind of tailing that back a little bit more, you're seeing this season just how effective he can be as a defensive player. Samson made a great point, I believe, on one of his podcasts. I'm not sure, but
sorry, there's a
in the bubble here. No, you're good. In the bubble, he played maybe the best defense of his career. And that was because he was struggling so much on the offensive end. He wasn't allowed to have the usage that he usually did. he wasn't being given the minutes that he usually would. So his defense was just on another level. He was compensating for his lack of offense through the defensive side of the ball. And maybe, this year we see a more well-rounded Pascal. Darko has talked about the efficiency on offense, maximizing the shots that he has in terms of where he's catching the ball and how he's being effective in these offensive sets. But on the defensive side of things, I think that applies as well, because you have a player who is so good when you give him the leeway to muck things up on the off-ball side, and he has shown that so far. And as the on-ball stuff that you mentioned, him locking up Ant, he had some possessions last night against Giannis too. I think his on-ball just defense in general is the fact that he's so quick, right? He's so quick. He's able to, because of his size, like that combination of size and speed makes him such a special defender on ball, because he can guard multiple positions and he can move around with the quicker guys and sort of be a big body against some of the bigger players in the league. He's a special defender, man. And I think the Raptors are littered with special defenders. And that makes this whole team a really, really unique group defensively.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to something that I just said before. What makes him special, both off ball, but also specifically on ball at times. Now, I don't necessarily want him to be the point of attack defender all the time, but I will say this, and Beyond mentioned this, and he was right. I had to go back and look because I forgot. This dates back to Dwayne Casey putting him out in the Wizards series against John Wall.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That changed the series.
Yeah.
Right? So going back all the way till there, it's like, I think we forget about these things sometimes. It's just like, man, like he came in the league like that's a tough assignment for someone. That was his rookie season, I think.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it's one of those things where you have these impacts on the court that aren't really felt because like Allen Iverson, the jump shot gets you the bouncing card, the thing, and all these stuff, but none of those things get you the jump shot. And so it's interesting because there's also the other end of the court, and there's a lot of things that don't always show up. Pascal has seemingly managed to do a bit of both. I genuinely think that he is underappreciated in a ways that mimic Lowry at times, because this fan base was pretty not so nice to Lowry until
no, they weren't.
The ring.
No, you're right. Pascal does the fact that he carries a lot of lineups is a huge part of, very similar to Lowry in the sense that he was like, these guys are floor raisers, right? Because you take those guys out of the team and the team is completely different. The lineups that they carry, the fact that they are able to carry these bench lineups, Pascal did it so often over the last 2 or 3 seasons. He's doing it less now because they've now thrown that responsibility on Scottie Barnes. But ultimately, I mean, the fact that he's been able to do that so consistently, that reminds me a lot of Kyle Lowry and just what he's been able to do. He's a special player, man. And the defensive side of the ball is something that he's always been so underrated in because, again, the advanced numbers do not level a player like that defensively.
The way he flips his hips, that's the key on the on ball, because obviously, again, you don't want him to be, I don't want to toss him out there against whoever's the equivalent of John Wall today, right? Yeah. I don't want him guarding Kyrie. That shouldn't be his assignment every game, all game. Although it is funny because, as Samson pointed out on your show, there's been times when he's been tasked to be the point of attack defender this year, and he's done a phenomenal job. But right now, like, you can use him in so many ways. I do still think that he can be used as a roamer, but if you're talking about how to maximize all players, sure, maybe he's not the roamer. Scottie's more of the roamer because Scottie does a really good job at roaming as well. And right now, I just don't think that Scottie, he tends to hedge up a little bit too high at times, and he's a little bit.
No, that's absolutely the case. Yeah. I think that's an area where Scottie needs to grow. He's been really good actually so far this year at not doing it as much.
Yes.
And obviously the off ball stuff is where he's thriving right now. Similar to Pascal, actually, very similar to Pascal on the off ball side of things. Although Scottie's length just makes him, a better weak side rim protector.
Absolutely.
And absolutely. I think that's going to help him scale up to being a better defender overall than Pascal was or is right now. The on-ball stuff, when it comes to Scottie is just like you got to be able to use your length to compensate for the speed. So when you have a guy like, who was it last year? They were playing the Warriors, and he was guarding Jordan Poole, picking him
Mhm.
up half court. There's no reason to do that for Jordan
Yes,
Poole.
yes.
You can give him a little bit of space, even though he might pull up on you, right? Like it's okay, like that's okay. Use your size and your length to compensate for that space that you're giving. So that's where Scottie needs to grow.
This is
And then I
dated
think,
back to Summer League was the first time I really noticed it, where I was like, he
uh
does this a lot. So I know it's going to improve, and it has improved.
yeah,
But it just, one of the observations that I've noticed. But also the post defense for both, especially for Pascal, the numbers have been phenomenal. Have always actually been phenomenal, to be honest,
hmm
per basketball index, I believe.
yeah,
So I can't remember the percentile, but I know they gave him like either an A or an A plus in that rating, which obviously is going to be a good percentile. Um, but yeah, so simply put, it seems like we're back to the two-way play, and I think it can't be overstated, but Siakam right now showing that he can be a versatile player.
absolutely, yeah,
What's interesting is last night's game. This is filmed after the I almost said the Portland game, definitely after that, after the the not Philly. No, the Bucks game, where we actually had a really amazing both defensive rating, but also offensive rating as well. Sorry. And so I think my thing that was interesting from that game was just how Pascal was able to find his spots a little bit more. But it also seemed like they kind of, to be honest, went away from the point 0.5 offense a little bit.
yeah. And by the way, we'll see more that they go away from the point five
Oh,
offense.
I believe it. The man needs some, like I said, losses speak
Yeah,
volumes.
yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah,
if Masai's coming in and saying winning, winning, winning,
hmm
well, at the end of the day, you can have whatever principles you have, but when those losses
yeah,
pile up, they're gonna go back to the same dude who they, I don't want to use it in the wrong term, but let's just say at moments before the Portland game, Malachi Flynn and Precious Achua had a higher usage rating than Pascal, which also does like doesn't make any sense for Scottie either. I'm like, can we
yeah.
get Scottie the ball more? Can we get
hmm
like like
Some of the high post stuff that they're doing for Precious and Jakob, I think we will slowly see that go away. I would rather Pascal and
Scottie and
Scotty.
I've been asking for this for the longest time. I'm like, can we just use Pascal and Scottie in like the exact same
Yeah, yeah.
places?
Ultimately, I think I don't know what that is, what the underlying reason is for that, because it seems so clear that like that actually would make your point five offense work a little bit better. But
I have theories, but I'll tell you them later.
yeah, I ultimately it's weird where the Raptors are at with Pascal, because
Yep.
they know his talent. They know exactly the type of talent that he is. I think everybody who watches the Raptors understand the type of talent that he is as well. But it also seems like there's a gulf in the middle in terms of, the contract stuff, the contract negotiations, and where he wants to be, maybe, or where they want to be in the future of their franchise, and how that might look. It's just a lot of these questions go away, by the way, if the Raptors don't make that Jakob deal. But that's another
I
conversation for
put it
another
out
day.
there. I'm not. It's
Yeah.
no shade against Jakob. I
No,
just put
no,
it
it's
out there.
not. It's not. It's a fit thing, right? We started off this conversation talking about roster construction and how
Mhm,
much like maximizing a player is based on the talent and the things around him.
mhm.
And when you have Jakob, right, it makes the fit with Scotty and Pascal wonkier. That's just, it's point of fact. It's not anything against Jakob or the type of
Mhm.
player he is. You put Jakob on a team that has tons of spacing and tons of shooters and ball handlers, and watch how that guy thrives. It's a little bit different when everything is congested in the middle. And season, by the way, that continues to shrink more and more, because Dennis Schroeder is shooting 50% from three right now. That probably doesn't hold up. Pascal is shooting 45% from three right now. That probably doesn't hold up. Scotty is shooting 42% from three. That most likely doesn't hold up. So when these guys sort of normalize their 3-point levels, teams are going to start sinking in even more and more. and that's going to make things a lot more congested. Which makes me curious over like how the next 20 to 40 games of Raptors basketball looks.
I think that they can make it sustainable. It will probably this will probably be the last point, and we'll end off here. But I think that they
Sure.
can potentially, we could talk about it a little bit, but I think they can make it sustainable to the level of like I said, 18th. I'm not asking. I'm not. Listen, I don't want an A. Just pass the assignment, right?
Yeah.
But I think they can get to the 18th overall. But what it requires is two things. Now, during the summer, one thing that I said about Scottie, as I said, even while seeing him in his ultimate weapon, Miami highlights, is I did notice one thing that stuck out to me. I watched him with Beyond, and we both said the same thing. I said he seems to have something that he likes, and that is important. You want a player like him who has needed to grow his offense to have
Hmm.
something that he feels comfortable with.
Right.
Um, and Beyond said, I think I know what it is. And he said, I think it's the fade away from the mid range. I said,
Right.
yes. What's interesting is he's starting to hit that. He now has to learn how to uh, chain that up with counters
Hmm.
because a fadeaway is never going to get you to the line.
No, that's true.
Um,
Yeah.
most time, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't.
Yeah.
But if he can have just that shot and he can hit it on a regular basis, that opens up the floor. Because I keep going back to this Caitlin Cooper, quote. But you have a sheet of paper and you slip it under the door, and that's Pascal. Well, what if the door is actually has a foot jammed into it, and
Right.
now it's not that?
Yeah.
Changes things. Just those little margins, because basketball is margins. It's seconds. It's not minutes, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully. I think that
No,
can make a big difference. Also, the more that we can get auto 40 games, I think that
anything would be welcome at this point with Otto.
because you saw last night, it's an adult
Mhm.
in the room. There was one sequence. I think Will Lou also posted the same sequence, but he posted I think the first part of the sequence, not the second part. So I think he
Yeah.
got because it was back to back sequences where he got a he drove, got a 3-pointer for Scottie. Scottie missed it, got the rebound. Malachi was like, and he's like, no, not yet, not yet. ran a pick and roll where he slipped the ran a slip screen with Trent. Trent passed him the
Yep.
ball, flipped it right, and also
To
to add to
Scotty.
that, I just want to give one other shout out to a player who really got Scottie the play. It was Grady.
Mm-hmm. Because he
Grady
spaced out to the
decisively
corner. Right?
attacking it.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. I love that play because it amplifies what Otto Porter Jr. can bring to that bench. And the actualized version of Scotty plus bench lineups will include Otto Porter Jr. because you have Scotty, you have Otto, who's a career, near 40% shooter. He's also a great rebounder for his position. That coupled with guys like Grady and Gary Trent Jr., maybe you throw in either Jalen McDaniels or Chris Boucher or Preston Chachua, whichever one you kind of feel like. That is your bench lineup right there. And yeah, we can talk about maybe Malachi Flynn being in that lineup too. But regardless, I think like lineups that include Scotty plus the bench are going to look like that. And Otto is so important to that. He's important as a team defender too, because I think he can potentially close some lineups for you depending on what you need out there. And he's just such an important part of this team. Like he glues things together for that bench in such a major way that it's going to be tough to know that you have him there, but also you might not be able to get him for 60 games in a season, which is really tough. It's tough. It's a hard pill to swallow. But yes, I'm just overall. By the way, can I ask you a question? Can I throw it back at you? How are you feeling after the 5 games of this season? Where are you at headspace wise with this Raptors team and sort of where they're at?
Okay, so my thoughts have kind of remained the same.
Okay.
The ceiling is the ceiling, in spite of my thoughts of the construction of the team. I still think you have enough talent and enough smart players when as long as you're not running all bench lineups, right? Like, I'm sorry, but running Precious and Flynn and no real veteran presence out there does not help either of them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's ways to eke out enough to get you to that level. I feel comfortable with that, and I feel like it's enough to get you there. I'm of the mindset that this year is not the year that you want to because of that Jakob Poeltl trade.
Right.
I know people say the pick is a sunk cost. True, but then if you're also selling your assets 10 cents on the dollar, like you mentioned Poeltl, I think Poeltl's going to be here for at least 18 months.
Okay.
Because you kind of have to. If you can't sign a guy and then the next day it's like Danny Green, he unpacks his stuff and then you're just like, hey man, you got to move.
Yeah.
Because then you're now it's just bad for the optics of it. And also it's bad for, I keep saying this isn't agent relationship driven business.
Yeah.
You can't be messing with people's stuff, especially the agents, at the end of the day. So because it will come back to bite you for sure. So I think there are ways to make it work. I still have my questions about OG because I think regardless of whether or not you move Pascal or not, the reality is that most nights he's going to be relegated to a role that is not one that he has stated that he wants.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not he can handle, I don't see the scalability, as people like to use that term. I don't think that you can scale him up offensively beyond. I think he's in the perfect role that he's in this offense, which is not that far away from his role last year. Yeah. I don't see him being content. So I'm curious where that goes. And that's always, again, even if you get blue chip stuff for Pascal, I mean, they're probably going to take precedent over that, right?
Yeah, how the future looks with that. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. And the shape of this team could really change in the next couple of months, depending on what happens with Pascal. But
I forgot another thing. The other reason that they can't really rebuild is, number one, $350 million spent on renovations, okay, and increasing the ticket prices.
Yes. No, you're right. Yeah,
you have to justify that.
And the whole selling the team thing is definitely part of the conversation here. Like the MLSC is potentially moving to have Rodgers and Bell not be their owners. I mean, who knows if that's going to actually come to fruition?
How long have you been watching the Raptors for?
A long time. I remember the teachers union, man. Yeah, I remember.
Okay.
The
okay.
Yeah,
so, yeah, because I don't want to expose your age here. But what I'll say is this: I don't remember them ever doing, even if you go back to the Vince Carter days and stuff like that, even during when we traded Bosch, we've never done a true rebuild, and I don't think we ever will. It's just not that market that we will. And so for that reason, I don't ever see us doing like a true Sam Hinkie,
pull the plug on everything. Yeah.
Pull the plug.
Well, I mean, honestly, they might get to the point where, and I'm not trying to go too long-winded here, but like they might get to the point where they might not have a choice, because if there is no come to fruition moment with this Pascal situation, the team becomes wholly worse when you trade him for whatever you trade him for. It doesn't matter what it is, right? And this season they become worse. They probably keep that pick, that top 6 protected pick. They probably keep it if they trade him sooner rather than later. I'm not sure when they would trade him, but who knows? And then from there on, you're looking at 2025 and 2026 at potential years where you got to keep that pick as well. So
I mean, you don't even have seconds until 2026 too.
Exactly.
So yeah, like that's the thing. But even then, it's like if that's the direction that you want to go, you have to make that soon. And if I'm doing that, I would just rip the whole thing down to the studs to make sure that you can. Because if you are not one of the, I would say 3 worst,
3 or 4 worst. Yeah.
Yeah. But even if you're the 4th worst, because the problem with being the 4th worst is, look at the Detroit Pistons.
Yeah.
Right.
No, you're right.
They were the worst. Now, if you're not the bottom 2, right? If you're not the bottom 2 and you end up out of it,
yeah, It's dangerous, man.
Now you're giving away a top 7 pick and you
Yeah.
have worst assets. So
Yeah.
that's been my only thing is I'm like, you might as well still like see out the year,
Yeah.
you know.
The goal should be to let this pick convey this year and let it not be that bad of a pick.
If
Like,
you
let
want
it
to,
be.
if you want, hey, I'll give you 2 names, right? One, the brothers on our team, Harper.
Oh, okay, you're right. Yeah. Oh yeah.
He's
Oh,
next
okay.
year,
Yeah. 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 You're right. Yes.
and
Yeah.
he's supposed to be really good.
Okay.
So let's tamper away, okay? The other one is Cooper Flag. So if you want a
Yeah.
crack at any of those two or both, then you have to navigate that really specifically. But I think either way, you can feel I think you could feel the competitive team between now and then. Like,
Yeah.
um,
Look,
yeah,
the goal should be to let it convey this year. That's what the goal should be. I think that's ultimately what it should be.
yeah.
But
I
yes,
just don't want to go through every the next 2 years
I
where
know.
it's like,
I know.
man,
I know. I know,
we
man.
might
I
be
know.
out. Can you imagine you lose this year, you get to the thing, and you're like, oh yeah, and then you're out, and then you convey the pick. Man,
It's
that would be tough.
that would be brutal. That would be absolutely like worst case scenario. That is absolutely the worst case scenario. Yeah.
All right. Well, the Kings did it. It took them only a couple decades. Uh, we'll be there. We'll be back. But yeah. With that being said, before we get to the very end, you asked me, how are you feeling? Are you okay?
Yeah, no, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. Look, it's
That's
easy
good.
to. I came into this season with pretty low expectations. I feel like there were a lot of people who came into this season thinking they're, you mentioned that they're going to be a playoff team. I'm
I
wary.
didn't say home court. I just want to put that out
Okay.
there.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. I'm wary of that. I think
Mm,
I would probably lean towards them being a playing team.
mm,
And who knows if they're at the top or at the bottom of the play-in, but I'm not sure. But I think in general, I came in with low expectations, so I'm more so happy to be along for the ride and seeing Scottie develop and
mm.
having some cool moments from Grady, and that's it. Like that's all I'm really expecting from the season. I'm cool with anything else on top of that, and yeah, we'll go from there. That's where I'm at with the Raptors this year.
For sure, for sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think what I would caution people to do, for the general fans, is just enjoy the ride. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't think enough people do. I see people going from Scotty is the worst human being on the planet to he's the future MVP of the league
hmm,
to Pascal's a terrible person to we can't get it's just like just
right.
enjoy basketball.
Yep.
I don't think enough people do that.
No,
So
you're
yeah.
definitely right. You're definitely right. There's not a lot of people who watch basketball for the enjoyment of basketball, which is crazy to say, which is absolutely wild to say.
Yes.
And yeah, there's definitely not a lot of people on twitter.com that do that as well. So
Nope.
yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah, with that being said, it has been fun, people. I will definitely link his stuff as every other guest in the description down below. So I will be asking you about that shortly. If you could
For
just send
sure.
me all the stuff with all the
Yeah.
socials. But also like, comment, and subscribe on this channel if you like these discussions. The next episode, sorry, people, I lied. The next episode, just because I have to edit it, will be Mac and Curly, although that might
Let's
be before
go.
this. So stay tuned on the Mac Curly stuff. It is filmed, just need to edit it.
Oh yeah.
And with that being said, it's been fun. Everyone, take care, be safe, and take care. Peace.